Right now, I'm going to show you how to get information from people without even asking questions, and I'm going to do it using the exact same techniques that are taught to the CIA. I want you to imagine you and I are standing together in the produce section of a grocery store, and I give you this mission. Within 60 seconds, you need to find out from that employee how much they make per hour. Now, you might go up and just ask that question, but what's going to happen? You're immediately put into some kind of weird category in their head, because we don't, at least in Western societies, talk about money and sex and things like that out in the open. So asking somebody how much they make per hour is probably going to put you into a weird category, even if they do answer the question. But the second part of this challenge is you have to do it within 60 seconds. You can't be labeled as weird, and you're not allowed to ask any questions. If it was me, I would be using a technique called elicitation. Elicitation is the art form of getting sensitive information out of people while asking little to no questions. So in this grocery store example here, I might go up to that employee and say, hey, I'm actually having a hard time finding the baby carrots. Notice that wasn't a question. I didn't ask for help. I didn't say, where are they? I made a statement. And her immediate response is going to be to say, oh, they're right over here. So now as we're walking toward the baby carrots, I might say, you know what? I just wanted to say congrats. I just read an article this morning that says you guys got bumped up to $19 an hour. That's incredible. I bet you guys are all excited. And she turns to me with a weird look on her face and says, what? We only make $14.75 here. So I've just got the income. I'm not weird. I didn't ask any questions, and I didn't ask her about her income specifically. What I did was trigger a need to correct the record, which is your first lesson in elicitation. You can do this exact same thing inside of an Uber. So I want you just to imagine climbing into the back of an Uber and saying something like, you know what, I just read an article that said Uber drivers are the most highly satisfied employees in the country. I bet they just take really good care of all of you. I had no idea. What do you think is going to be the response from that Uber driver? Again, we're triggering a need to correct the record. So there's three core ways to use elicitation. This is quotes, facts, and figures, disbelief, and provocative statements. So this natural human need to correct the record or to write information that might be inaccurate is innate in all of us. We hear something that doesn't really line up and we're more likely to correct it. It's the same reaction that is innate for us. When someone doesn't believe something that we're saying, we'll kind of double down on that. And the third reason why elicitation works is we also have this innate natural need to fill in social gaps or to fill in conversational gaps, which is what we're going to be creating when you learn about provocative statements. So let's start with quotes, facts, and figures. Using quotes, facts, and figures means that I'm using a statement that says, I read something, I heard somewhere, my friend told me, a friend of mine, my neighbor's wife does the same thing for a living and she said XYZ. Or we're also going to say, like, I saw something on television, I just heard on the news X, Y, and Z. So we're just saying that we heard something or saw something somewhere. But that should typically have information that isn't quite right or is slightly off to make that person correct the record. So we're using those statements to trigger someone's need to correct the record. The second elicitation technique is disbelief. When somebody says something and you respond with no way, or there's no way that's possible, they will typically double down. So if we go back to the grocery store example, I want you to imagine I did this thing where I said, I read this thing online, you guys got bumped up to whatever number an hour, and she corrects me and says, oh, we're only making $14.75. The moment she says we're making $14.75, I might say something like, that's not possible. I know that you guys got bumped up. I just read it. I don't remember where it was online, but I read it. It has to be true. So now I'm triggering some kind of disbelief. And let's say I said, I heard you guys got bumped up to 19 whatever an hour. She says, oh no, we actually don't make that much. So I don't get the sensitive information out of her. Now my disbelief is, there's no way. I read this online. I saw this online. It was a credible source. I can't remember the name of it, but I definitely saw that online. So now the disbelief makes her about 10 times more likely to reveal that sensitive information. As another example, just consider we're in the Uber. And I said that Uber drivers are the best treated employees. And they turn around and say, like, what? I don't think that's very true. They don't treat us very well. And then I respond with disbelief. And I said, no, there's no way. There's no way. It seems like they treat you guys perfectly. I see all the Uber drivers are really happy. I bet you guys get paid a ton of money. And I bet Uber's not taking a whole bunch of that. Any human being would turn around and be like, that is not the case at all. And they're going to provide more and more and more sensitive information starting to come out. The third elicitation technique is provocative statements. And I want you to become a master at this. And you can become a master at this by the end of the day today. A provocative statement is any statement that you can make that provokes a response in another person. Quotes, facts, and figures are an example of provocative statements, but there's a specific one I want you to learn right now. And this is just starting a sentence with, I bet or so. So let's say I'm in the Uber or in the grocery store example, and I say something like, well, I bet that's really challenging, or I bet that is interesting, or I bet that's a fun job to have. Or the so is, so you must travel a lot. So you guys must be exhausted at the end of every day. So you guys must face challenges nonstop. Those kinds of sentences, just summarizing what someone is suggesting or saying, cause that person to continue speaking, and the sensitive information is coming out in a way that they'll remember the conversation as not being interrogated or questioned. So the amount of comfort they have with revealing that level of sensitive information is tremendous. They view it as a good conversation between two people, and they view it as you're a good conversationalist and you're not asking those questions. They willingly gave that information up, and it doesn't feel weird because they were correcting you, because they were responding to disbelief, or because they're just providing information to elaborate on your provocative statement. That's what makes it comfortable. And if you want to bring this down to the operative level, you want to use elicitation for sensitive information towards the middle part of an interaction. We have a tendency as humans to remember the beginning and the end of situations with the greatest clarity. So if I think of an event, I remember the beginning and towards the end of that event with the most amount of clarity. If I want to get something really sensitive out of a person, I'm going to do it towards the middle. So I'm going to talk about general topics here. I'm going to gradually bring those topics down, start using more elicitation towards the middle of that conversation surrounding the sensitive data that I want to get from that person, and then gradually drive the conversation back towards more general topics towards the end of that discussion. So the person's more likely to remember we talked about general things, and this is a way to almost create amnesia for that tiny event where that person gave up that sensitive information. Now it sounds cool. You want to get some sensitive information out of a person. We want to get somebody to talk about something that goes on behind the scenes in an area of their life that we can't really see. That is kind of cool, and it's a great trick, and it's really cool for connecting with people. The secondary benefit to this is, who does that Uber driver talk to about how much they hate their job? Who does that grocery store clerk or produce worker talk to about how much they make? The good thing that elicitation does is not just about getting information, it's about connecting with people. because instantly within a conversation, if I'm using elicitation, I've already got you to start speaking to me with the same tone and the same way that you speak to your family, friends, and people that you trust. So I'm dramatically changing how you perceive our interaction, and you're going to be doing this to other people. So what you're going to be doing by using elicitation is getting them to a point where you're leveling up their level of focus, their level of openness, their level of connection. And now that they've started becoming more and more comfortable revealing sensitive information to you, now you're leveling up another one of the 6 axes, and that's expectancy. They're expecting to have a good relationship with you. They're expecting for good things to come of this conversation, because this is not how they speak to normal people. Elicitation works on lots of the 6 axes to seriously level those things up for persuasion and influence. In the next section, I'm going to cover influence techniques and tactics and how those combine with authority. So join me in the next section right now.